If you are a Dead & Company fan, odds are you know John Mayer's custom 594 that he has named Honey. This is certainly a fan favorite guitar for Dead & Company fans and John Mayer fans as well. This custom 594 really is a special guitar that John has been using over the years, and I thought, why not tell the story of this guitar today in this video for you guys. So sit back and relax and let's go over the story of Honey. So our story begins May 26th of 2019, and John does an Instagram live from his kitchen actually, and we see him playing Honey, and I'll play a little bit of the clip for you guys the very first time we see John with this guitar.
Only if I play the lick. Oh. Is that the lick? Isn't it interesting, like the black shirt looks like my hand's just kind of appearing there? You know what I realized I do on the guitar though? Is I don't do that. It's a very three-dimensional, it's not this. It's very 3D. It's working in all.
Now you might be thinking after watching that clip, well, hang on a second, that doesn't look anything like Honey. And you're right, it doesn't. This was the pre-modified version of the guitar back when it was just a standard McCarty 594 that John was playing. But we know because of the actual pattern in the body of this specific guitar, it is the exact same guitar that would later be transformed into Honey. So kind of cool, we actually see John with the guitar right before the modifications occurred. Now what's pretty crazy though is that this Instagram live was May 26th, right? Fast forward to May 31st, not even a full week later, and we see John performing with Dead & Company at the Shoreline Amphitheater, and we see what we can call the Mark I version of Honey. This guitar has now been transformed into the earliest kind of version of Honey. That's why I'm just calling it the Mark I version. The middle pickup has been added to the guitar, and the neck tone pickup knob has now been replaced with a little toggle switch. That's the earliest incarnation that we know Honey to have been transformed to. And it occurred in the 4 whole days between that Instagram live in the evening and then the Shoreline performance. So I guess they had like 4.5 days to really make that transformation of the guitar. So maybe John playing that guitar during that Instagram live was kind of like him being like, all right, this is the last time I'm playing it before. We're going to try and experiment with this thing because I'm really enjoying this guitar. It's just pretty cool to actually see the guitar right before it was transformed. And then 4 days later, 5 days later, okay, here we have it. Now one thing that's also worth noting here with the pickups is that John does have his own custom version of the 5815s. It's impossible to say whether or not he's using those in this guitar, the same ones that he has in his Platinum McCarty 594. If he's using those in this, there's something else custom wound for him, or one of the standard configuration of pickups and just another one added in the middle. Unfortunately, it's rather impossible to say, but I'd probably lean towards maybe them being those custom wound pickups for John and Honey as well. So this is leading us into the summer of 2019, and Honey really becomes John's favorite guitar, it seems, to use with Dead & Company at this point. But also in 2019, we have the 2019 World Tour. John was busy that year, touring with both Dead & Company and with his own band. Now, during the 2019 World Tour, transitioning here leg 2, which was the North American leg during the summer, we actually saw Honey take the stage a few times, and a really cool performance is this one of Fire on the Mountain. But as you guys are seeing here, Honey's being used on July 20th in Providence during John's own tour for Fire on the Mountain. So just really cool to see how the guitar is transitioning into his own kind of mainline tour and gear arsenal as well. It just means John is really enjoying the guitar. And it wasn't just Grateful Dead covers during the 2019 World Tour that John was using Honey for as well. For one example, we have Albany on July 19th, the day actually before that Providence show with Fire on the Mountain. He used it for If I Ever Get Around to Living. And one more example that I just have to share with you guys is from July 25th at Madison Square Garden during the 2019 World Tour. And John would use Honey for Edge of Desire. And that is a huge song for this guitar to actually be used on. Normally John would use the Platinum McCarty 594 instead, but Honey actually got used for this performance. So you're not just hearing something like and not to say If I Ever Get Around to Living isn't a crazy song to be using that for, but it's not, one of those songs on a nightly, in the set list that people go absolutely crazy for, where John's very much like, all right, like, I'm not just kind of jamming to If I Ever Get Around to Living while Isaiah's soloing. No. He's going to use it for Edge of Desire, and as you can expect, it sounds absolutely incredible. Now it's at this point here, let's fast forward into the Fall Dead & Company tour of 2019, and Honey Mark II now is formed. And both tone knobs this time are gone in favor of a second toggle switch. So we have both volume knobs actually remaining, and then those two switches where the tone knobs were. The earliest we can pinpoint this change was Madison Square Garden Night 2 on November 1st, that we see Honey Mark II actually take the stage. And Honey Mark II is where Honey would actually stay. That's the final kind of format of it. But because we have three kind of distinct phases of the guitar, that's why I'm classifying them in that way, where we have the original version when it was a standard guitar, then the first edition we saw in the summer, and then the fall version of the guitar that would then stay in its entirety. So Mark II is where Honey currently still lives, at least as far as we know and as far as we've seen. Now, we're going to fast forward a little bit here into 2022. And December of 2022, a PRS dealership got a really interesting guitar, and I remember seeing this guitar show up online, or someone sent it to me, whatever, and I thought, okay, this is really interesting. It was a private stock 594, but in the Honey spec. And I was initially really surprised that PRS would even make a version of Honey that a store could order. And basically, talking with the owner of the guitar, what happened is that high-end guitar was the #1 seller of private stock guitars in 2021. So they were given a special order to celebrate being the #1 seller of those private stocks, and they chose a Honey spec private stock 594. So when this first kind of came out, I was like, okay, maybe because this was for, being the #1 seller of private stock guitars, they are being allowed to make a Honey 594 from the private stock. Maybe, they got special permission from John to actually make this guitar. And I kind of thought, okay, because everyone was asking for John to make a signature version of the 594, whether it was that platinum finish one with the custom pickups or Honey. People were just like, give us a John Mayer signature PRS 594. And I'm still, to this day, very surprised that PRS and John haven't made this happen, because it would be awesome. But then just a few weeks ago, actually, as in 2024, me making this video, another shot of a Honey spec 594 was taken and posted to PRS's Instagram from the factory. So now I'm not sure if you can actually just order a private stock 594 and that's just something you can do. If it is, that's really cool. But I think I speak for all of us when I say, just give us a John Mayer signature 594 with his custom specification of pickups, and then you can either do the platinum version or maybe the Honey version. And those are just two different specs of the same guitar. Now, one other thing I want to add in terms of 2022 is that Honey was played a little bit during the Sob Rock tour. It's incredibly minor. This example here is If I Ever Get Around to Living at the State Farm Arena, Atlanta on April 9th of 2022. What they kind of did in this version, and I think some of the other versions as well, is they tease Here Comes the Sunshine by the Grateful Dead. So maybe that's also why in certain examples, If I Ever Get Around to Living is one that John actually picks up Honey during his own tour, because he's channeling a bit more of that Dead and Company, Grateful Dead, Jerry Garcia kind of playing. So maybe it makes sense in that regard as to why we see Honey, not always, obviously, but sometimes kind of shows up for If I Ever Get Around to Living. So just another example I wanted to highlight, and didn't want to leave out a example that John actually used this guitar during the Sob Rock era, but again, it wasn't a ton. But maybe the time has come and gone, at least for a Honey John Mayer signature PRS, because as far as I've been able to find, the last time that I've seen John holding Honey and playing it live was at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles with Bob Weir and the Wolf Brothers on October 25th of 2022. This performance that you're seeing here, 2 years ago now, pretty much, is the last time I've actually seen John holding Honey. I've gone through and watched a ton of Dead and Company footage on their final tour. I've done and watched a ton of footage from the Sphere. And, well, we've seen Honey in place of like a backup, for example, during the final tour of Dead and Company in 2023. It was on the stage in a stand, but John never actually played it. The last time was this performance where he joined Bob Weir at the Greek Theater. And going through and trying to find footage of John actually playing Honey in 2023 or 2024 for that matter really made me realize just how all in John went with the Dead spec Silver Sky. I knew he had played that guitar pretty much the entirety of the final Dead and Company tour, but I just didn't realize exactly how much until I tried to find footage of him playing Honey. There were some exceptions, like he played the Charvel for a couple of songs, like not very often at all. It was 99, 98% the Dead Spec Silver Sky. So the fact that Honey was just there as a backup for that guitar just shows that transition even in the sound that John was going for with Dead & Company, with the Super Ego 1, the Super Ego 2. Then you have Honey. Then you transition into John mainly using the Dead Spec Silver Sky. And then when it comes to the Sphere residency in 2024, we wouldn't see Honey at all, but John would still opt to use a humbucker 594, going mainly back to that platinum metallic finish 594 that we've mentioned a few times, and I've done a video discussing John's tone at the Sphere with that specific guitar. But kind of interesting that Honey was that guitar with Dead & Company for humbuckers, a 594 with humbuckers that had 3 of them. And then you'd think that that would kind of be the guitar John would go back to for something like the Sphere residency, but instead he goes back to the Platinum 594. So I guess that's kind of his favorite sounding and probably favorite playing 594, again, currently at this point. Now, as far as the Sphere residency is concerned, the one other thing we can mention is that there is a shot of the guitar racks that John had behind the stage, backstage, and one guitar really does look like it's Honey in there. It's hard to tell, but it looks like that might be Honey in the guitar rack. So I think it's a very strong possibility that John did have that guitar with him during the Sphere residency, but it never got used. So it's there. It's, you know, it's not being totally left behind at this point, but he's definitely not using it. So that essentially concludes the story of Honey. There's not that actual much to talk about. In 2019, this guitar was, you know, the guitar pretty much for that tour. Well, I remember back then, you know, being really excited with the tours going on. Everyone was talking about the Mock Sand Satin finish Silver Sky. That was a huge thing. And then Honey. Those were kind of the two big ones. And then the Maple Silver Sky as well, like John teased too. But, you know, mainly those two guitars were kind of all the talk for the 2019 World Tour. And it's kind of funny now to go back and make this video and realize how little of Honey we've actually seen over the past 2 years. And maybe this guitar that just will come back, you know, it's possible. John's put guitars away back in the vault for a while and then brought them back out. Who knows? Or maybe, just maybe, if Dead & Company kind of keeps going on and doing residencies or things like that, I know they're definitely winding down, maybe John will develop some sort of actual Super Eagle 3. Do I think that's likely though? Probably not. I think that whole entire kind of time has come and gone, but just kind of cool to see Honey's role in John's career. And I hope you guys did enjoy the story of Honey. If there are any other guitars you want to see me cover in these kind of story documentary videos like this, let me know in the comments down below. Take care, and we'll see you guys on the next video.